Kia ora koutou. Welcome back to Face to Face, and this week we have with us Marnie Prickett from the Choose Clean Water program, which has been touring our country over the summer. So kia ora Marnie.
Kia ora.
Welcome along.
Thanks for having me.
And so tell me, how did this tour come about, this Choose Clean Water tour?
So we started, I'm originally from Auckland, and about a year ago I started talking to a bunch of people up there who wanted to do something. Then I moved to Palmerston North, and suddenly our circle of people wanting to do something got bigger. And about sort of 4 months ago, maybe a bit longer, we started thinking really, like getting into the planning stages, and we came up with this idea of letting New Zealanders tell their own stories of the destruction of our waterways themselves. It was important for us to allow locals to tell their own stories, so it wasn't just us coming in and being like, this is how it is. So yeah, we started formulating that idea and planning it. Then the Tourism Export Council came on board and gave us some funding to get us around and cover our costs, and then we hit the road on the 10th of January.
Great. And so the group, I mean, you're a student, you're studying?
I'm studying agricultural science at Massey University.
Okay, and the rest of the group, similar sort of students or?
No, we're a bit of a mixed bag. So the crew itself, the 5 of us who were actually in the very small car that we were in, one is just finishing his Masters in ecology, another one does bird surveys, he works as a bird surveyor as a job, Kailisha is a research assistant at Massey, and Ben makes films. So we had a really good bunch of talented people.
So how long did you spend stuck in this car with each other?
So we had 4 weeks on the road, which is quite a long time to spend
with 5 people in the car.
With 5 people in a Subaru driving around and all our stuff. And sharing motel, like holiday park cabins, like 1-room holiday park cabins at night. So it was full on.
And what's the outcome you guys are looking for from this whole campaign?
Yeah, so we've got this petition that we've been running. We're aiming to get 10,000 signatures on this petition, which we are well on track to doing by the end of March. The petition's sort of a 2-pronged approach that we've gone for. One is that we want the bottom line for our national standards to be swimmable, and we want that to be a central government policy that they roll out. And the second thing that we want is that it to be established in that legislation, which is currently under review, that the priority for the legislation is primarily people's health, the health of wildlife, and the health of the environment. And so that needs to be sort of established really clearly. We don't see that happening in the way that the legislation is being talked about and reported on and discussed at the moment. So yeah, swimmable and health of people and the environment.
Cool, so that petition will be underneath this video. You'll find a link to go and sign up to that petition if you want to. So tell me about the trip, this month spent in a car with 5 people, Marnie. What did you see along the way? Any interesting stories?
Yeah, so I have to say, and I was saying this to you before, is that for us as relatively young New Zealanders, it was quite a devastating trip. It wasn't, apart from being sort of jam-packed in a car, there was it was very moving and distressing to drive around and see so many sort of people suffering with water quality problems and the amount of pollution that's going into their water, and in some cases just the absence of water in their river, and how quickly that's happened. And I've said this a few times, but we are sort of old enough to remember in New Zealand where that wasn't the case, but we're young enough to see like a long stretch of time heading out in front of us and wanting to turn that around now. So in the case of the absence of water, the most poignant story around that was from there was a number of them, but one of the stories that came out of that was a story of the Waitohi River, which is up in North Canterbury, and about 15 years ago that started disappearing over summer, and it hadn't done that before, and it was a guy called Sam Mann talking to us about that.
And where's that water going? What's it being used for? Well,
in that catchment, Sam told us that he thinks it's the dairy pumps that are pumping it out and using it for irrigation in that catchment. Right. And he said that, it was poignant for a number of reasons. It's quite intense to see a completely dry riverbed.
Yeah.
The other thing about it was that him and his wife actually talked a lot about the stress on their family as they've spoken out about this, and the fact that when they've asked they've been talking about this for at least a decade now, and when they've talked about it, people have labelled them as being extremists and that their views are extreme, and that, why can't they just be sort of like team players and stuff? And it's really divided that community, so much so that Ali describes sort of a tension as she walks. Sometimes when she feels people coming up behind her and stuff, she doesn't know how people are going to view her because it's been such a divisive issue.
Yeah, so there's this kind of this view amongst some people that a drop of water that reaches the ocean is a drop of water wasted, right? So that view is kind of still out there. There's that.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we hear a lot from the authorities, and it's starting to be sort of repeated. I have to say, at like Massey in the ag science student world, I've heard that repeated back to me a couple of times. This idea that those things are wasted, but actually there's a huge complex ecosystem out there, and that functions on that water being there. People rely on it, businesses rely on that water being there, and I'm talking about tourism, but also about farming. It's not just. It's not. We don't need to commodify it's impossible to commodify everything. Those things have other functions beyond their commodification. Yeah.
So that's water use. What about water pollution? Any interesting stories about that?
Yeah, so a sort of surprisingly moving, and I don't know, I say surprisingly just because this guy that we spoke to, Craig Pauling, is such a sort of, he's so animated, and when we spoke to him he was very sort of smiley and cool and just like a good speaker. But he talked, and so it was surprising when I watched it back to hear his story about Lake Ellesmere. So he's mana whenua at Lake Ellesmere, and he talked about sort of wanting to keep doing wakaama and keep doing those cultural practices like fishing in that lake. And his determination, Lake Ellesmere has had a huge amount of nutrient go into it, and it's really been Stuffed, yeah. It's really been
It's a technical term for you folks out there.
It's really not in a good way. But this determination of Craig's to maintain that connection, even in the, most people at this point walk away from that lake because it's like so gross. Like, why would you want to spend any time? But there's that connection that he had and that determination to maintain that intimacy of eating out of it, of practicing on it, was really, I found that intensely moving.
And so what did he have to do to sort of deal with that, the level of pollution in that lake if he's going out and doing wakaama?
So they do that, he was saying that him and his friends like joke about having, they're like, if you fall out of your boat, don't open your mouth and stuff like that. He also practices on the Avon River in Christchurch, and he said, when you do fall out of it, he's had skin rashes and stuff before, so everybody washes after they go and do their wakaama on that river. So
yeah, pretty intense.
Yeah.
So you can see all these stories on the Choose Clean Water site. Again, that link will be below. So, Marnie, what do you say to the people that say, "Come on, you're a bright-eyed young thing who's just a bit naive about the real world, that we can't have swimmable rivers everywhere. It's just too expensive." What do you say to those people?
I'd say we're not looking at the costs of not having them swimmable. That's a big concern of ours, that we're quite often told that the costs of having high standards are prohibitive, but we're not told of the costs of what happens to us as a country when we have those low standards and we allow things to keep degrading. I look ahead, and for all of us, I think, what happens to us in terms of our jobs as well, and our job security and our quality of lives as we go ahead and we don't have clean water. It's so fundamental, and it's so fundamental to New Zealand, which is our competitive advantage for at least 100 years has been the fact that we are an unspoilt and untouched place. And so I say first of all, see it from our perspective. A lot of these people are older than us making these decisions. Please see it from our perspective. We've got a lot of our lives ahead of us. The other thing I would say is that this is not just coming from us. This is not a pie in the sky thing that we've just gone, oh yeah, we'll do that. this is backed up by a lot of people, not only scientists, but also agricultural commentators saying, no, we can do this. Yesterday, somebody wrote in the business section of on the you know, saying that that's the right goal. You know, yes, it's going to require some changes. Yes, there's going to be a time frame, you know, that we're going to have to deal with. But it is the right goal for us.
And what changes do you think are going to be needed? I mean, obviously heaps. But what's your kind of your main couple of changes that you think we're going to need to make?
I think you know, we have to look at our agricultural models, and I was saying before that you know, as an agricultural student, it does alarm me about how slow the university system is on sort of trying to progress us beyond this intensification. Now that we know that this doesn't work, not only environmentally, but we're seeing it not working economically.
And by intensification, you mean more cows on a patch of land, basically.
Cool. So I guess we need to look at that, but we also need to start educating these young farmers that are coming through. You know, these 18-year-olds I was saying before, you know, they're ready to learn that, and they're so creative and they're so passionate. We should be presenting the problems to them and saying, hey, look, this is what we're dealing with, and let some of that creativity and problem solving come out of some young people as well. So that needs to change, and as an Aucklander, I've seen that our infrastructure in Auckland is just not coping, and I think we need to really have a look at that. But what I see is that we're not prioritising the health of those waterways, so we don't then have to adjust our infrastructural standards. And that's another story that was on the tours. We went to see a stream in West Auckland that has had regular sewage overflows. It's at the back of a primary school. It's in a beautiful bush. It's stunning. It's got a waterfall, beautiful bush block. But every couple of years, a whole lot of sewage comes over that waterfall, raw sewage.
Right, wow.
And the response of the authorities is that that stream is not it's not considered legally a recreational facility. So there's no obligation for them to look after it as such. So there's no recourse to doing anything about it. So, you know, I think we need to get our priorities straight.
Great. So it's not just a rural problem; it's a problem in the cities as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Thank you very much, Marnie Prickett.
No worries.
As mentioned, there'll be links to the Choose Clear Water site and
Choose Clean Water.
Choose Clean Water, and of course their petition below this video. Good luck with getting your 10,000 signatures.
Thank you.
And good luck with getting swimmable rivers.
Yeah.
Yeah.